So I guess just to start off, can you tell me a little bit about what Grove Street Games is and what your history is?
So yeah, we started in 2007 when I was 21. Me and my business partner, Mike Owen, started the company.
So Wardrum, that's your
That's the original studio name, yeah. And we changed it to Grove Street Games about 3 years ago while we were working on the latest Grand Theft Auto project. And that was just coming from a place of like wanting to get away from just get like a fresh start, really, because we were working on such a big new project and so much of our previous work had been tied to like mobile games, and so we really just kind of wanted like a fresh new start kind of thing. And Grove Street felt appropriate because our previous office location was literally on Grove Street downtown on 2nd Street, and there's also the tie-in with the GTA games with San Andreas. There's Grove Street's actually where the main character.
I thought it was a Grand Theft Auto reference. I didn't.
Yeah, it all just kind of came together very serendipitously,
That's really cool.
The location.
That's awesome.
Basically, just we wanted to get into games. We'd been working at a couple game studios here in town and had some business contacts and used that as an opportunity to launch into doing contract work. So the first job we did was we ported Ghostbusters, the game, from the Nintendo Wii to the PlayStation 2. And that was in 2009, which was like 9 years after the PlayStation 2 came out. So it was like an old console that we were working on. But that was our first gig. And then we've sort of escalated from there, doing more and more complex projects and growing with the industry.
All these posters are titles that we've worked on in the past. Conduit was like a Wii game that we did the Android port for and brought it to Android. Team did the PlayStation 2 port for the Ghostbusters game way back when.
That was the first project, right?
If it wasn't it was very early on, yeah. Great Battles Medieval was another like PS2 game. The Orlux titles and Turtle Tumble were for mobile. Max Payne we did the mobile port of that. So yeah, it's just kind of like a little, you'll see it throughout the office as we walk around. We just have posters up of like all our work that we're quite proud of.
That's awesome. What have you done since then? Like, what are some of the projects that people might recognize at home?
So probably the number one name recognition product we've worked on is Grand Theft Auto. We worked on mobile phone versions of the games for Grand Theft Auto. We've done various console ports, and we also did a remaster project with Rockstar that shipped a couple years ago.
Yeah, I'm going to get back to the Grand Theft Auto trilogy in a moment, but I did want to talk about like your role. Like, what does the CEO of a game company do? I mean, it sounds like, I feel like for a lot of people working in a game company sounds like a very fun job, but I imagine it's also stressful.
Right. It depends on the studio. It depends on the business. So we're more of a small to medium-sized game business, so the CEO is going to wear many hats. I tend to do a lot of the high-level production decisions. I do a lot of the high-level technical decisions in terms of steerage for where we take things. I do some of my own programming because I never want to get away from that because I really enjoy it. And that's half the job. Then the other half is going to be managing the studio as a whole, working through employment decisions, figuring out our growth, what are our larger projects going to be moving forward, and then doing business development. And that's usually approaching people who have intellectual property they want to leverage, or different publishers who have funding for potential projects. And that, it's probably an even split, 50% development, 50% business development.
Yeah, so of course you mentioned too that Gainesville, you've been based here for quite a while, and it's where you were founded and everything. So what kind of role does Gainesville play in the studio, and what does it mean to you all here?
I mean, personally, Gainesville means a lot. I was born at Alachua General, and I've been in the area my whole life. And that's the case for a lot of our employees here. We don't want to leave. We love the town. And then locally, we try to support local interests as much as we can. We did that especially during COVID. And we also do things like buy local products and things like that really often to try to stay within the community. The other part of it is I think we kind of bring a unique sensibility to the industry. Gainesville's more of a laid-back town than a lot of other towns where game businesses exist, so we tend to have more reasonable hours, things like that. And I think the employees really appreciate that sort of level of interest and work-life balance that we have afforded to us by the culture of the city.
And over here, that very cool theater room.
Oh no.
This is, it's still decorated from a Mario Kart tournament we had in here for just like a fun thing, but in general, this is where we come to like play test our games as a company, and so we'll just like throw the game up on the huge TV with really nice sound, and this is how we play. About at least once a week, we get like all of the team leads together and play test whatever the current project is that we're working on, so we can all just see it together, talk it through, and more importantly, just see it on like a normal, a big TV, but see it on a TV the way a normal player is going to see it, right? Because we're all working on our computer monitors all day long, so it's very beneficial to actually get out and see it running on a console on a normal TV, like a player's doing.
So I take it from the Mario decorations that it's not just play testing that happens in here. There's
yeah. So we one of the things about our company is we love doing company socials at least once a month to just like have everybody kind of get together outside of work hours and just have some fun. And one of the things we did recently, was like a Mario Kart tournament within the company. I did not win it. It's gets pretty heated.
Oh yeah.
Pretty heated. Yeah.
What's the favorite Mario Kart game? No.
8. Honestly, we're going with the newest one just because it supports like split screen with enough players and networking and stuff. It really just lends itself the best. But I know when it comes to Smash tournaments, there's some preference for the older Smash
Melee,
titles.
I'm guessing. I know that there's, with a lot of Mario Kart fans, there's a preference for Double Dash. So I didn't know if you all had a...
Yep. No. This tournament was on the newer one.
I know we talked about a little bit about your role and kind of what you do here. Like, what kind of work does Grove Street Games do? What kind of games do you all work on, and what kind of work do you all do on those games?
So, I would say what we really tend to steer ourselves towards are technically complex projects that other studios are averse to. If it seems like the technology isn't quite there yet, we're very apt to jump into it. If it seems like a technically difficult project for other reasons, such as taking a game and putting it across 5 different platforms simultaneously at a worldwide launch, that's very complex logistically. So doing those sorts of projects is kind of our bread and butter. We like to tackle things that other studios might see as risky. And that's where we've sort of, I think, found our groove. So you'll see things, if you look through our history, you'll see we did things like porting GTA 3 to mobile phones in 2011. At that point, there was no game of that scale on phones with that level of complexity, and people were kind of gun shy to do it. Another example is Ark Survival Evolved. When we ported that to mobile, it's a game that classically didn't run well on PC, so scaling that down and getting it to run well on a mobile phone was a giant technical challenge, and something that is exactly the sort of thing we're looking for.
So I take it that most of your work is support and helping other developers with their games?
For the most part. Yeah, I would say that's about 90% of our business right now. We do have games we've self-published that have done extremely well, and we've also done a certain amount of demo development and stuff like that for first parties.
So I heard you mention that you had previous experience with game developers around Gainesville. I just wanted to explore that for a moment. What were some of your experience, and would you happen to have been involved with Trendy Entertainment?
So let's see. So for Artificial Studios, which was a studio that existed prior to Trendy's existence, I worked there as the technical director before I founded this studio, and we shipped a game on Xbox 360 called Monster Madness. That was sort of my first deep foray into game development. And then for Trendy, when Trendy was founded, I ended up doing a little bit of work with them because we were neighbors. So we both were in the Sun Center at that time, and my good friend who owns that studio was just across the hall, and they needed some help on doing game console work and mobile work for their Dungeon Defenders IP. So I think we ended up doing some contract work with them in exchange for, I think collaborative development between the two studios. So pretty familiar with them early on. But then when we moved out of the Sun Center, we stopped working with them.
I know this is a tough place to be in, but I know that Trendy has had, kind of a complicated history in the eyes of the gaming media. There's been accusations of toxic workplace environment. So what's kind of your take on that, and what was your experience working with Trendy?
Well, I worked with them kind of purely on a contract basis. We supplied our employees at a very typical 40 hours a week. So I didn't experience any of that toxic workplace that's been mentioned by the media or they've been accused of. Gaming in general, the industry, is known for those sorts of problems. So it's not, I think, crazy to think that people were upset with potentially how much work they were doing at any particular company in gaming. So that's probably as far as I can say, other than say I think that that's a general problem in the industry, and I know nothing specific about Trendy.
Yeah, and I know that scales up. We've seen, of course, a lot of similar accusations come out about Activision Blizzard.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see it about pretty much every company except for this one.
So you mentioned that you've been working, or you started off working a lot with mobile games, and now it's a lot more of like these upscale console games, the GTA trilogy, the Arc series. Can you tell me a little bit about that scaling up and kind of this transformation that you all have gone through?
Well, it's sort of similar. You know, we're trying to follow, you know, the things that are technically interesting and difficult that our studios aren't interested in, and taking these massively complex game worlds and putting them onto other platforms is something that a lot of companies are steering clear of, because there's a lot in it, especially when you're doing something called SimShip, when you're developing a product at the same time as it's being made on a different platform by the primary developer. That can end up being a lot of intricate back and forth between the two studios. The logistics become a nightmare for a lot of studios. But because we have so much experience doing it, it ends up not being as problematic for us, because we know exactly which plug-and-play solutions to apply to any given situation.
I mentioned I was going to get back to this. That we've been talking a lot about the Grand Theft Auto trilogy. I know that you've been heavily involved with Grand Theft Auto, the Grand Theft Auto franchise, for so long, and it's an iconic, influential series in gaming. That is how I heard of you all in the first place.
Yeah.
And I know that reception from the wide gaming media was not too favorable. You know, there were a lot of complaints about quality, the graphics, a lot of technical aspects and things of that nature. So I wanted to get your response on that, because I feel like, you know, tucked away in Gainesville, you don't get to respond to things from the big gaming media so often. So, you know, I wanted to come in here, you know, what you all had to say about how that made you feel.
I understand. So I guess the first thing to broach is that was Rockstar's product. You know, we developed what was asked of us for that product. And we're not in charge of responding to the media or marketing related to it. I would say that here in this studio, we're proud of the work that we do.
So when you all play the game, have you played it like recent? Like, when was the last time you revisited it?
It's probably been a few months.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have it installed. I'm very busy, so I don't get to play games very often, but I have a couple things on rotation that I like graze, and I'll play for an hour here and there. And the trilogy is one of the things that I have installed on my Xbox right now.
Right.
So I just wanted to ask, like, when you play the game and when you get back into it, like, does that ever weigh on you, or like, what are your thoughts when you go into the game? Like, does that ever weigh on your mind, or are you still able to look at the product and be like, we did this?
Well, obviously, we're proud of the work that we put out in terms of what we were asked to do, if that makes any sense. I do understand the idea that when something of that magnitude, with that level of interest comes out, people want the moon and the sun and the stars, you know. And the development reality for any particular game in any particular project is going to be very different from what the public perception is ever going to be. You know, when you get down into making games and working on the nuts and bolts, it can often be very, very different than what people think it is.
I guess more broadly, not just about the trilogy now, how does it feel to be trusted on such big name projects and things that people care about so much? Not just GTA, but also Arc.
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing, you know, for us to work on stuff that influences millions and millions of people's lives. I think I did the math once of just the overall number of human lifetimes that have been spent in the games that we have worked on, and it's just staggering, and it's amazing and compelling, and it makes me think that what we do here is very incredibly important, and it allows us to focus on that rather than thinking about money or reviews or anything like that. We just want to make sure that the most people have the best possible experiences they can have. And that does weigh on us. And I think that when we talked about earlier about how a lot of studios struggle with toxic workplace culture, some of that can often be self-inflicted, because they think about the potential impact these games are going to have on people's lives, and you can't blame them for it in some ways, for wanting to make sure they make the best possible thing and spend the most possible time trying to make that happen. And it's something we're very conscious of here and try to work on.
Yeah, and the way you all do that mostly now in the present is with Ark, which I know a lot of my friends are huge fans of.
Right.
So what is Ark for people who are not familiar? I know Grand Theft Auto is like a name that people will recognize, and they probably have their own image of it in their head already.
Yes.
But Ark, I think, is a newer name.
Right. So Ark had a really simple answer to that question 6 years ago when it came out, in which you wake up, in your underwear on an island, and you have to survive, and you end up finding that this island has got creatures on it that are from, 50 million years ago, 100 million years ago, full of dinosaurs and other stuff, really, honestly, all over the place, with caves to explore and all these things you do with your friends, and that's how you would have described the game 6 years ago. But now I would describe Ark as like this amazing community platform where people come together to build experiences and communities together on these, persistent game worlds, where, yes, it starts out by surviving and making it through, getting to a point where you can have a house that you've made that protects you from the dinosaurs on the island, but it's just become so much more than that. So I would just call it this gaming experience and community that encompasses the globe, full of millions of people who really enjoy, at the end of the day, pretending to ride dinosaurs together.
Yeah. So what kind of work do you all do on the series? I know it's been several projects now that
we've done a lot. We actually, probably the most interesting thing that we've done in our eyes is we did develop our own little offshoot game for Ark called Ark Dinosaur Discovery. That's a Nintendo Switch title for children, ages 4 through 10, where you can learn about all the different dinosaurs and like their actual facts that we know about them, and explore essentially a version of the island in sort of a very casual, nonviolent setting. So we really enjoyed making that, which is completely different from all the other Ark work. The other Ark work that we've done has been porting it to other platforms. We've developed systems for Studio Wildcard to use in the mainline Ark product. And then most recently, we worked hand in hand with them to develop Ark Survival Ascended, which just came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so I did want to chat about that. I know the holiday season is coming up, and with a lot of Ark fans, I'm sure that's going to be something that's going to be on a few people's gift lists this year. More broadly, tell us about what Survival Ascended is. I understand it's a remaster of the original game. So what does that exactly mean?
Right. So almost every asset has been touched and brought up to the standards of Unreal Engine 5, which is the new version of the game engine technology that the original Ark used. This new version can do all of these amazing technical feats, like an insane number of polygons that makes things almost photorealistic, very, very, very realistic lighting effects that allow light to bounce off of surfaces and make everything feel like it's alive and vibrant and real. So bringing that to players was the number one concern. Like, we have all this new technology, we've got this live game that millions of people are enjoying. We need to bring it up to today's standards. So that was really the impetus behind it. But then there's all sorts of cool stuff that's come along the way. So we get to utilize something called Epic Online Services to make it so that players will be able to play between consoles and PC seamlessly. We've got access to Overwolf's mod support, where they brought essentially this whole back end of mod integration into the game, where someone can make a new dinosaur and make it available to players on PC and on console, and they can just play that together in their map. And that's just the beginning. I think the mods are going to become extremely creative and complex and interesting. Really excited to see what can happen to the game and the platform, really, as a result of all those systems coming together. So it's really just like growing up. Like, it's like getting Ark and say, hey, this was an indie game. Let's really polish as much as we possibly can and bring it up to today's technological standards.
That's awesome. And what's your relationship like with Studio Wildcard as these long-term partners, and with the fans as well of Ark?
So yeah, that's pretty complicated. So the Studio Wildcard's founders are friends of mine. Jeremy Stieglitz, who is he's like one of the primary co-founders of the studio, was my original boss actually at Artificial Studios back
Wow.
in 2005.
Throwback.
Yeah, worked with him for just a couple of years before I started my studio. But we've worked on and off together, through the decades. That helps, so we have that, I think, inherent trust. I mean, that's why I was able, particularly with ARC, just kind of jump in and help them with a lot of systems and ports. And then in terms of with the community, when we made the ARC mobile port, we managed the community with that. And we have our own community managers here in-house, and they still work with those communities. We also do that for the Switch version. We ported the Switch version of ARC last year. So in terms of the community, we actually directly work with and help the community on certain platforms, but then the main ARC community is entirely handled by Studio Wildcard, and we don't handle that part of it at all. So in some ways, we sort of have a different relationship with the community in that some of them know us as their devs, and some of us know us as the people who work with the devs that they work with.
This entire side of the office here is our community management department. These are our stands in here, and someone from our QA as well. This is working on ARC right now.
So I just wanted to ask too, you mentioned Microsoft, and of course, Microsoft has been a partner with ARC. What does it mean? I believe Survival Evolved is on Game Pass, and what does Game Pass mean to you all, and also what Xbox Game Pass is within all that?
Right. So rather than going to a store, if you have Game Pass, it's more of like a Netflix for games, where players can go look at all the possible games that they could play, and if it's on Game Pass, if it's on that service, they'll be able to just go ahead and download the game as if they own it, play it as much as they want, and they only lose access to that game if they stop paying for the Game Pass subscription. The millions of players take part in the subscription service. It allows them to not think about purchasing any individual game. Instead, they just can jump onto Game Pass and find something new. So it's very similar to the video streaming experience someone would get from a Netflix or an Apple TV or what have you. How that has affected game developers is really nuanced. Because when we talk about making money off of games, it's a complex relationship that we have with finances, paying our employees well, and making sure the fans have a good value, right? And so finding that balance is different for every single product. Every single product, in terms of how we think about making sure that everybody's happy in those three places, is always difficult. Game Pass brings kind of a new tool to our toolbox, if anything. Usually those Game Pass deals come at some sort of premium licensing fee that goes to one of the first parties, and so we can take that into account, but that also comes at the potential cost of selling those games wholesale or ad nauseum rather than through the streaming service, right? So that all just kind of is going to play differently based on which product, which game it is. If you've got a game that is built to bring in as many players as possible, and then they could potentially spend money in the game on cosmetics or what have you, then that's a really good Game Pass option, because you want as many players downloading as possible. Whereas if the game offers some sort of premium experience where they're you're front loading, hey, you spend $40 or $50, $60 on this title, and you're going to get all of this stuff that's just for you, that doesn't necessarily make as much sense. It really depends on how all three of those things balance out there.
So I wanted to ask too, of course, I know it's upcoming, so it's probably a slippery slope here, but ARC 2, I know I was actually at the Xbox showcase this year, and I know that a lot of people have been, particularly in the Xbox community, really excited about ARC 2. We saw Vin Diesel in it. It's pretty huge, especially, coming out of Gainesville. You don't see something like that that's so high profile very often. So is there anything you can say about ARC 2?
Probably nothing more than you already know. ARC 2 is in development. I've obviously seen far more of it than you have, and I can say that it's beautiful, and that's really probably as far as I should go.
Do you have any other, well, I guess I should ask too. I know you've had a long relationship with Rockstar, the makers of Grand Theft Auto. GTA 6, have you had any hand in that?
I cannot touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, I wouldn't either if I was in your position. So I guess I'll follow up on that one when we get closer.
I'm excited for the whole world to see the trailer, and that includes me. I'm excited to see the trailer, and that'll be great.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And then I guess my last question is, what else is next? Where do you all want to be?
Okay, yeah, I mean, we'll almost certainly be working with similar partners for a long time. That's always our goal. Like as a studio, one of the mantras by which I run a business is, and this is kind of a silly trope, but it's really, I believe it, and that is, if you are honest and hardworking, you'll always win out in business because you'll have no competition. That's the line, and I believe that wholeheartedly because it sort of speaks to whenever you're working with the same partners consistently and everyone's being transparent, they tend to want to keep working with you, and you end up having the same partners for a long, long time. That's what we aim for, and you'll see that through our studio's history is working with the same people a lot because they learn very quickly that we're that way. That being said, we're always looking to work with someone new or to work on new products, and I expect in the coming years we'll find something else interesting and hopefully, again, some giant product that we can proudly, stick our name somewhere in the credits for.